Welcome back, my probability amplitude partiers. I'm your quantum excited state of soiree supervision, simultaneously hosting and observing the collapse of every possible office shindig across the multiverse. You're tuned into the Multiverse Employee Handbook, the only podcast that treats your social anxiety like a superposition of all possible embarrassing moments. In our last episode, we explored the mind-bending world of M-theory and meetings about meetings, where we learned that every pointless discussion spawns an infinite number of equally pointless parallel discussions. But today, dear listeners, we're diving into something far more terrifying than any meeting could ever be: the multiversal office party. That's right. It's time for the annual Interdimensional Halloween celebration, where your costume exists in a quantum superposition of totally clever and horrifically inappropriate until observed by someone from HR. It's the one night of the year where the chaos of quantum electrodynamics meets the chaos of corporate casualization, and nobody knows which will prove more destructive to the fabric of reality. Picture, if you will, a party where Schrodinger's cat is both the life and death of the party, where every dance move creates its own alternate timeline, and where the question, "What are you supposed to be?" becomes a matter of metaphysical significance. It's like Richard Feynman's famous diagrams come to life, except instead of tracking particle interactions, we're mapping the trajectory of Bob from marketing as he makes increasingly questionable decisions near the punch bowl. But before we don your quantum costumes and calculate the probability amplitude of actually enjoying yourself at a work function, let me share with you a cautionary tale. Gather round, my festively fluctuating friends, for the parable of the Photon Punch, a story that would make even Paul Dirac reconsider the nature of antimatter and office mixers. In the fluorescent-lit realm of Quantum Dynamics Incorporated, specifically on the 42nd and a half floor, Janet from HR was facing her greatest challenge yet, organizing the annual Interdimensional Halloween party. Janet was the kind of party planner who considered expect the unexpected to be quaint advice from a simpler three-dimensional era. Armed with a clipboard that existed in a superposition of everything under control and total chaos, Janet had thought she'd covered all the bases. She'd arranged for non-Euclidean decorations, hired a DJ who could spin tracks across multiple timelines simultaneously, and even ordered pizza from that place in Universe X27, where toppings are theoretical constructs. But Janet had overlooked one crucial detail. She'd put Maxwell Planck III, great-grandson of the famous physicist and notorious party animal, in charge of the punch. "Don't worry," Maxwell had assured her, his bow tie vibrating with barely contained excitement. "I've quantum entangled the fruit juice with exotic particles. It'll be the most memorable punch in company history." Those words would prove to be both prophetic and problematic, much like Heisenberg's initial draft of his uncertainty principle. As the party began, employees filtered in wearing costumes that challenged both taste and physics. There was Dave from accounting, dressed as Schrodinger's cat. "Original," muttered Janet. Sarah from IT, who'd come as a Klein bottle. How does she even wear that? And Bob from marketing, who insisted he was dressed as dark matter. "So, you just came in your regular clothes?" The trouble started when the first brave soul approached the punch bowl. Dr. Feynman, no relation though she wished there was, took one sip and suddenly began emitting photons in discrete packets of pure party energy. Before Janet could say corporate liability, the effect spread through the crowd like a wave function finding its quantum state. Employees started absorbing and emitting light at varying frequencies. The accounting department began glowing in the ultraviolet spectrum, making their spreadsheet-related conversations literally painful to look at. The IT team achieved perfect quantum coherence and started a synchronized dance routine that violated several laws of physics and at least 2 HR policies. In the corner, the CEO existed in a superposition of totally getting down with the staff and maintaining professional distance until someone from the board of directors observed him and collapsed his wave function into awkwardly doing the robot. Maxwell, meanwhile, was delighted. "Look!" he exclaimed, pointing at the dance floor where employees were entangling and disentangling in patterns that would make a quantum physicist weep. "We're seeing quantum electrodynamics in action, the interaction between charged particles and photons, but with more conga." Janet watched in horror as reality itself began to flicker. Each sip of punch caused partygoers to transition between energy states, creating a light show that made the aurora borealis look like a budget laser pointer. The DJ, now existing in 11 dimensions simultaneously, had somehow started playing every possible version of the Monster Mash at once. It was when the motivational posters on the wall began to achieve sentience, through a process Maxwell would later describe as quantum poster position, that Janet knew she had to act. With a decisive action that had made her the youngest head of interdimensional HR in company history, she reached for the quantum fire alarm. But before she could pull it, something unexpected happened. The party worked. Like particles finding their ground state, the chaos settled into a strange kind of harmony. Quantum physics and office politics achieved a perfect balance, creating what Maxwell would later publish as the particle theory of social dynamics. And so, dear listeners, as we close the interdimensional punch bowl on this cautionary tale, remember, in the grand cosmic celebration of existence, sometimes the best parties are the ones where you let quantum uncertainty take the lead. Just make sure you have a designated quantum observer for the ride home. And speaking of quantum interactions, let's take a moment to understand the science behind why Maxwell's punch had such illuminating effects. It's time to dip our toes into the fascinating world of quantum electrodynamics, or QED, the theory that explains how light and matter interact, and occasionally how office parties go terribly, wonderfully wrong. Now, before you ask, what does a theory about light and matter have to do with office parties? Let me remind you that the last time someone asked a seemingly obvious question about quantum physics, Bohr and Einstein spent decades arguing about whether God plays dice with the universe. Spoiler alert, not only does God play dice, but they also occasionally spike the cosmic punch bowl. Quantum electrodynamics, or QED as we'll call it, because even in a multiverse of infinite possibilities, nobody has time to keep saying quantum electrodynamics, began its journey to scientific stardom in the late 1920s. This was around the same time Paul Dirac was probably sitting in his office, wondering why electrons didn't just spiral into atomic nuclei like interns spiraling into existential crises during their first week. Dirac, much like that one colleague who points out problems without offering solutions, had identified a huge issue. Classical physics and quantum mechanics were like two employees from different departments trying to collaborate on a project. They just couldn't seem to get along. In 1928, he wrote down an equation that would later make him famous, though at the time, it probably just gave his colleagues headaches. This equation, which now bears his name, was like the first draft of a revolutionary interdepartmental memo. It successfully combined quantum mechanics with Einstein's special relativity, something previously thought as impossible as getting everyone to agree on the office thermostat temperature. But here's where it gets interesting. And by interesting, I mean so mind-bendingly complex, it makes the plot of Primer look like a children's bedtime story. Dirac's equation predicted the existence of antimatter, which is like discovering that every particle has an evil twin from a mirror universe. It's the kind of revelation that would make Philip K. Dick write 5 novels simultaneously, each one questioning whether electrons are actually dreaming of quantum sheep. This set the stage for what would become QED, a theory so precise it can predict quantities to 10 decimal places. That's more accurate than Commander Data's positronic brain calculating the odds of Riker turning down a chance to hit on an alien species.
Hello?
But before we dive deeper into how Richard Feynman, Julian Schwinger, and Shinichiro Tomonaga developed this theory, and won a Nobel Prize that they probably had to share awkwardly like the last donut in the break room, let's take a quick break. When we return in segment 2, we'll explore how QED explains everything from why you can see your reflection in a window to why the quantum punch at our party made everyone glow like they'd just walked out of Tron's digital nightclub. Plus, we'll discuss why Feynman diagrams look suspiciously like the flowcharts HR uses to explain the company's vacation policy. Stay tuned, my electromagnetically entangled entertainers. Welcome back, my photon-exchanging partiers. While some of you were busy quantum tunneling to the break room, we were just about to delve deeper into the science that makes our interdimensional office party both possible and profoundly confusing. Remember how Maxwell's punch made everyone start glowing like they'd walked straight out of a Jeff Bridges Tron sequel? Well, that's actually a perfect illustration of QED in action, if you ignore all the safety regulations it probably violated. You see, quantum electrodynamics is essentially the theory of how light interacts with electrically charged particles, or as we like to call it around the office, how to make sure your presentation slides actually show up when you turn on the projector, a quantum approach. Back in 1947, during what must have been either a moment of brilliant insight or a really bad case of conference room fever, Willis Lamb and Robert Rutherford discovered something peculiar. They found a tiny shift in the energy levels of hydrogen atoms that couldn't be explained by existing theories. This became known as the Lamb shift, though the thing that made physicists question everything they thought they knew about electrons would have been a more accurate, if less concise, name. This discovery was like finding out that your meticulously organized filing system had a drawer that existed between 2 other drawers. It shouldn't have been possible. Yet, there it was. It's the kind of thing that would have made Isaac Newton spill his apple cider if he'd been around to see it. Enter our trio of quantum heroes, Feynman, Schwinger, and Tomonaga, working independently. Because apparently, even genius physicists didn't like group projects. They each developed different approaches to solving this puzzle. It was like having 3 different consultants propose solutions to fix the office printer, except their solutions actually worked. Feynman, in particular, developed a way of visualizing these quantum interactions through what we now call Feynman diagrams. Picture, if you will, a flowchart showing how particles interact, except instead of depicting the flow of responsibility for the missing break room sandwich, it shows the exchange of photons between particles. These diagrams became so successful that even today, physicists use them like corporate middle managers use PowerPoint excessively and with varying degrees of effectiveness. But what makes QED truly remarkable is its precision. This theory can predict results that match experiments to an accuracy of 1 part in a billion. That's more precise than the office expense reporting system, even in the universe where they actually check the receipts. Gather round the quantum water cooler, my probability amplitude partiers. It's time for some practical tips on organizing your interdimensional office celebration without accidentally creating a temporal causality loop that makes Back to the Future 2 look like a linear timeline. First up, handling +1s across quantum states. We all know that awkward moment when your date exists in a superposition of realities, like Schrödinger's cat, but with more commitment issues. Pro tip: always check which universe your +1 is coming from. You don't want a repeat of last year's incident where Dave from accounting brought his alternate self from the mirror universe. You know, the one with the goatee who kept trying to sabotage the karaoke machine. Now, about those costume choices. Remember, in a quantum party, your outfit exists in all possible states until observed by the office gossip. This is why I always recommend against dressing as a Heisenberg compensator from Star Trek. The moment someone asks what you are, the uncertainty principle kicks in, and suddenly you're wearing either everything or nothing at all. HR is still dealing with the paperwork from last time. Here's a handy checklist for your interdimensional office party. 1. Dance floor dynamics. When dancing across probability amplitudes, remember that every move you make creates infinite parallel versions of yourself. It's like that scene in Jet Li's The One, but with more awkward shuffling and less martial arts. Try to coordinate with your quantum superpositions. Nobody likes a conga line that collapses into a singularity. 2. Refreshment management. Keep antimatter snacks separate from regular matter refreshments. The last thing you want is your cheese plate annihilating with its antiparticles like something out of a Douglas Adams nightmare. And please, for the love of Asimov's 3 laws, label which punch bowl contains the quantum entangled fruit juice. 3. Music selection. When choosing party tunes, remember that in quantum mechanics, everything that can happen does happen. This means your playlist technically includes every possible song simultaneously, like a cosmic version of Philip K. Dick's The Man in the High Castle, but with more ABBA. The trick is collapsing the musical wave function into something everyone can dance to without creating temporal paradoxes. 4. Small talk strategies. Avoid asking questions like, "How's the project going?" to colleagues who exist across multiple timelines. In one reality, they might be ahead of schedule, in another, hopelessly behind, and in a third, they've accidentally invented a time machine instead of filing their TPS reports. It's like that moment in Primer where you realize you're not just confused, you're confused in at least 5 different temporal dimensions. And whatever you do, never ask someone, "What universe are you from?" It's considered rude, like asking a Vulcan about their feelings or mentioning midichlorians to a Star Wars fan. Instead, try safe topics like, "How about that quantum weather we're having?" Or, "Did you see that ludicrous display of wave-particle duality last night?" Remember, in the multiverse of office celebrations, every party both is and isn't the best party ever until someone tags the photos on social media. And if all else fails, you can always blame any faux pas on interference from a parallel universe where social skills operate under completely different physical constants. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to go help resolve a crisis on the dance floor where someone's attempted moonwalk has created an actual quantum tunnel to the moon. Remind me to update the party planning guide section on dancing safely across space-time. Well, my wave function waltzes as our quantum celebration draws to a close. Remember that in the grand cosmic disco of existence, we're all just excited particles looking for the right photon to dance with. And sometimes, like QED teaches us, the best interactions happen when you simply exchange virtual particles across the dance floor of space-time. And speaking of questioning everything you thought you knew, prepare yourselves for our next interdimensional adventure, the Multiversal Suggestion Box. That's right. We're diving into what happens when every possible employee improvement idea manifests simultaneously across infinite realities. Picture, if you will, a humble suggestion box that makes the monkey's paw look like a well-adjusted wish-granting entity. Learn why Let's Improve Office Morale becomes an existential threat when it manifests across every possible interpretation. Discover what happens when someone suggests better coffee in the break room and accidentally creates a timeline where humanity evolved from coffee beans instead of primates. Plus, we'll explore the chaos of implementing conflicting suggestions from parallel universes. It's like that episode of The Twilight Zone, where everyone got what they wished for, except instead of one town, it's happening to every possible version of your office simultaneously. Even Rod Serling would need a stiff drink to narrate this one. Until then, this is your quantum superposed soiree supervisor, reminding you that in the multiverse of corporate celebrations, the party never really ends. It just reaches its ground state until the next excitation. Keep your energy levels high and your wave functions coherent.
Hello, this is Natalie calling from Brisbane, Australia. The Multiverse Employee Handbook was created by Rob Corrigan, is edited by Matt Parkman, and narrated by David from 11 Labs. All science fact-checking is done by Mohinder Suresh. The Employee Handbook staff includes Claire Bennett, Hiro Nakamura, and Al Bishop. Please be sure to subscribe to get updates on all new episodes.